Yeah.
Here we are. Already. No, I see it here, but I don't.
It's coming.
Excellent. Very good. Okay, fine. Very good. So, good evening, everyone. Happy to be once again in Uppsala, and very happy to be with you tonight. I'm always happy to come to this wonderful city of the students, as I call it. And as a matter of fact, we already began to cover many of the topics that I was thinking of mentioning today. I would suggest that I will start with a short introduction. I don't know how much time do we have, but I'll start with a short introduction to Israel and Israel and to Israel in the Middle East and domestic issues, and say perhaps a little bit, talk a little bit about Swedish-Israeli relations and another another fascinating issue, which is the Israeli economy and recent developments in the last few years. Very interesting. I'm just arriving from a very interesting meeting in the Uppsala Chamber of Commerce. As we were sitting there with a few of you, we spoke about the roots of Israel, at least the modern state of Israel. Speaking about the roots, you can go 3,500 years ago. I will not do this this evening, but we spoke about Zionism and about the birth of Zionism, the birth of the Zionist idea, which was born an idea which was born in Central Europe. We spoke mainly about the Austro-Hungarian monarchy, mainly Vienna, Berlin, Budapest, and I'm being asked many times, what is actually Zionism? Because this is the basis of the modern state of Israel. Now, I know, unfortunately, that in many places in Western Europe today, and also in Scandinavia, Zionism is considered to be, almost a bad word by those ones who are not very much sympathetic with the state of Israel. So let me define in just a few words the word. And Zionism is an idea, is a concept, is an ideology, which and above all it was a political movement with the aim to re-establish a Jewish state in the ancient homeland of the Jewish people, in the land of Israel, which was then called Palestine, which was under British rule, and before this under Ottoman Turkish rule. There is a tendency here to make a mistake. Palestine, the word Palestine, is an ancient Roman, or even before the Roman, a word that was used to this part of the world. This very, very small blue area is the state of Israel, and there was never, in this tiny part of the world, there was never a sovereign country since the Jewish kingdom of David. I don't want now to go into the 2,000 years history of the land of Israel, but since the Jewish state was destroyed by the Romans, it was also already always this part of the world part of another empire, the Romans, and then the Mamluks, yes, and then then the 7th century the Muslim Mamluk empire, and then came the Turks, and then came the Brits, as we said, and it was always part of another of a huge empire, but there was on all this time there was no other sovereign country in this specific part of the world. I find it important to mention this because many people are when I speak with young people, especially young students. Well, students are always young, but many of them believe that the word Palestine means that there was an Arab-Palestinian state in this part of the world, and we, Zionists, came into this existing state and like a colonial power and have occupied this. Well, this has nothing to do with history. As I said, there was never in this part of the world a sovereign state since the destruction of the Jewish state by the Romans at the year 70. So 2,000 years ago. Now, Zionism was born as an idea because of persecutions that started almost 2,000 years ago. The Jewish people was spread all over the world, and there was already always a dream to come back and to reestablish the Jewish state. But this idea was never translated into a political idea. It was kind of a dream, a utopia. It was a religious dream, but it was never translated into political action until the famous Theodor Herzl came, and we just spoke about it. And at the end of the 19th century, came with the idea to establish a conference of Jewish representatives from all over the world, almost all over the world, and to develop an idea, a political action, a political movement with the aim to re-establish the Jewish state and to bring together, to bring back Jews from all over the world to establish a Jewish to re-establish Jewish sovereignty as the state of Israel. Now, we spoke about a little bit about the history of my own family, which comes from Vienna, and the development of modern anti-Semitism in Europe. But one has to bear in mind another sort of misunderstanding. Zionism was not born out of or as a reaction to anti-Semitism in Europe. It was born much before, and of course, growing anti-Semitism and later on the Nazi Germany and the Holocaust, that was a catalysator, yes, that made things faster. But the idea of a Jewish state was born much before. It was part of the idea of self-determination that was born was very common in Europe at the end, second half of the 19th century. Now, for me, I was born in the state of Israel. So for me, a Jewish state and the fact that my mother tongue is Hebrew, for me it's a normality, it's obvious. But for the generation of my parents and and for the generation of my grandparents, Israel is a dream that came true. For some of them, it's a miracle. There is no precedence to an idea, to a phenomena of a people that was for 2,000 years scattered all over the world without territory of its own, without a country, state, modern state of its own, without a language of its own, coming back, returning to his ancient homeland, and re-establish a state that was destroyed, as I said, 2,000 years ago. Now let's go to current affairs. Again, I'm trying to describe here or to speak about the history of 3,000 years, more than 3,000 years, in just a few minutes. The reality that Israel was established in 1948, as you know, May 1948, and until that moment, this part of the world was ruled by the British Empire. They got a mandate from the League of Nations. They have evacuated this part of the world, and before the establishment of Israel, the United Nations, already after the Second World War, we had the United Nations. The United Nations decided to establish a Jewish state, or better to say, to establish two states in this very, very small part of the world. The Arab national movement, Arab, not Palestinian, Arab national movement was very much against. They saw us in many ways, many of them, a large majority of the Arab world still sees us as invaders. And we're very much against the establishment of a Jewish state. Now, this is a reality that in many ways exists until today. If you look at, not all, but most of the Arab countries, most of the Arab world, let alone the Islamic world, rejects the idea of the existence of the state of Israel as a Jewish state, and is still speaking about the Middle East. And when we speak about the Middle East, all of it is the Middle East, the Arab Middle East. If we speak about the Islam Middle East, it begins here in the Maghreb, and it goes until, if you want, Iran, and except from two countries with which we have signed a peace treaty, very important Arab countries, Egypt and Jordan, but the whole Arab world still rejects the right of Israel to exist. They speak about an Arab Middle East, an Islamic Middle East, and there is a reality that was born with the very idea of with the very rebirth of the State of Israel, May 1948. They reject the partition plan. What the UN is deciding in November 1947 is to divide this small country to two even smaller countries, an Arab state and a Jewish state. The whole Arab world rejects the idea of partition. They reject the idea of establishing of a Jewish state, and this is the beginning of the Arab-Israeli conflict. Let us go now to the present, because unfortunately the Arab-Israeli conflict is still here with us. We believe that the key issue in this matter is not details like whether to where to have the future boundaries between Israel and its neighbors, or questions like whether to establish a Palestinian state or not. The key issue is still the fact that the vast majority of the Arab Islamic world still rejects the very idea of a Jewish state in the Middle East. Now, people speak to us here about things like, occupation and the fact that Israel is, as many of them say, yes, a colonial power invading the Middle East. I suggest that we will have, and you are already doing this, yes, we speak about the dimensions. Look at the 20 Arab states and one small, tiny country, a Jewish state, which you can hardly see when you look at the map. Now, as I said, we believe, and we have seen this in the past, that the moment that Arab countries, including our Palestinian neighbors, will acknowledge, will accept the idea of a Jewish state, the right of the Jews to self-determination, the moment they will do this, we can live in peace in the Middle East. Now, things have become much more complicated in the last 10, 15 years, because the Middle East is changing. Not only Europe is changing, not only Sweden is changing, but the Middle East is changing. If we look at in the past, things were rather simple. There was, on one hand, the Arab world, there was Israel, there was the so-called Arab-Israeli conflict. Today, after the so-called Arab Spring and the revolutions within, the changes within the Arab world, and the split between Sunni and Shia in the Arab world, and the involvement of non-country or organizations which do not play as a country, as a state, non-state players, like various terrorist organizations, Hamas, Hezbollah, ISIS, Jabhat al-Nusra, and I can name you 10 more organizations which play a very significant role. And above all, a phenomena that has become the greatest challenge to the whole Middle East, and especially Israel, and this is Iran. Let me say a few things about the new Middle East, but I think I should go. By the way, this is just to give you some dimensions how small Israel is, yes. According to our calculations, Sweden is 22 times the size of Israel. So when people speak about Israel, and it is discussed in the media quite a lot, one should bear in mind what are we speaking about, yes? It's a small, tiny country. In terms of territory, in terms of population, we are almost the same as you. Sweden has 10 million citizens. We are about 9 million. We are a society of immigrants, and we spoke about it also, because the whole idea of the State of Israel, the whole idea of, and going back now to the perception, to the ideology, the Zionist ideology, the whole idea is to re-establish Jewish sovereignty in the State of Israel and to encourage Jewish immigration from all over the world. Now, we Israelis are very proud of the fact that since about 10 years ago, Israel is today the biggest Jewish community in the world. Because until a few years ago, there were the two main the two biggest communities, Jewish communities, were not in Israel. They were in the US and in the former Soviet Union. Not anymore. Still, the biggest Jewish city in the world is
New York.
Yes, yes, New York. But in terms of Jewish community, Israel is today the biggest Jewish, if you can call it Jewish community. It's a sovereign country, yes, and we are very proud of it. We also mentioned the fact that we spoke about the rebirth of my mother tongue, Hebrew, which was a dead language for 2,000 years. You know, it was a language that was used in the synagogues to pray, but it was not used as a modern country. And part of the rebirth of the modern Jewish state was the rebirth of the Hebrew language, which is today spoken by millions of people, and this is also something which is completely without any precedence. It was, as I said, more or less a dead language that was rebirthed, and not only this, we use it today as a modern language, and we have reinvented many words that did not exist. Yes, you know. In the ancient land of Israel, there was no word for computer, yes, and this is machshev. It is a new in Hebrew, and it's a new word that was reinvented in the modern state of Israel. Let me say a few things about the challenges that we face right now. I have so many slides here which I will not use because it's but let me say a few words about the challenges of today. When we speak, when we have a dialogue with the Swedish government, there is a tendency here to speak more and more with us Israelis as a focal question, and this is something which is rather unique to Sweden, about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Now, from an Israeli point of view, the challenges today in the Middle East go far, far, far beyond the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. One has to look at the whole picture and the whole strategic view on the region of the Middle East. From an Israeli point of view, the key issue to understand the Middle East of today is one and only one country, and this is Iran. And more than this, the Iranian aspiration to become a dominant power in the Middle East, and above all to export the Shiite revolution. As you know, beginning of 1978, the Shiite revolution in Iran, Ayatollah Khomeini, and later on the Iranian-Iraq war that lasted for 8 years. What we are seeing now in the Middle East is an Iranian aspiration to become a dominant power in the Middle East by exporting the revolution, the Shia revolution, first of all to the Middle East, and later on also to Europe. And I have to admit that they succeed. It is a long-term strategy. They developed this strategy in a very, very systematic, very efficient way. And what they have already succeeding, what they are already succeeding to do, is to create this crescent which starts in Iran, in Tehran, goes through Iraq, Baghdad, via Damascus in Syria, Beirut in Lebanon, and recently also, of course, Yemen, Sana'a. They're doing this, they're building this, they're developing this strategy, as I said, in a very well organized and and a very efficient way. They are using proxies. Sometimes they do it directly, sometimes they use a proxy. Let me just speak about the neighboring countries in, wow, it's a whole, no, I don't want to speak about the whole, let me just begin. That's it. Well, I'm missing here. Sorry. Somebody knows how do I go back to the presentation? Is this the presentation? Yeah, you're in the right place. Okay.
There is a point.
Snarare inte
You're
höger.
enlarge it there.
Till höger där.
Yeah, no, I have seen it.
Wow, technology. This
Yeah.
is a conservative association.
Well, you're the best technology in the
It's all
world.
that with you, please try.
Okay. Now, okay, I'll proceed. The biggest, sorry. Here it is. On the screen you see it. And then you push down, you push down the...
F5 med någonting här.
FM.
Vi prövar
Ah, excellent. Okay. So, speaking about the Iranian wish to become a dominant country. Let's speak about the immediate neighbors of Israel. I don't know how many of you followed the news of the last 48 hours. Another crisis in the Gaza Strip. What do we have in Gaza? Israel has evacuated the Gaza Strip 15 years ago, exactly 15 years ago, with the wish that the Palestinians will control the area and start using the massive support that they get from you Europeans and start investing the money in building their infrastructure, the roads, schools, hospitals, in order to establish a future Palestinian state. Now, what have they done? Under a massive Iranian intervention, and influence and support, the Hamas, which is a terrorist, radical, fundamentalistic Sunni movement, has taken over, and since then invested most of the resources in instead of investing it in the infrastructure, in acquiring weapons and ammunition, building tunnels, and fighting for the idea of a jihad. And what is a jihad? A holy war to destroy the state of Israel. Now, I don't want to give you now a long lecture about Hamas, but Hamas, in one sentence, it's a movement influenced very much and has its roots very much in the Egyptian ancient or old Islamic Brotherhood, with the main wish to destroy the Jewish state. And instead of taking the money that they get from international support, instead of investing this in infrastructure, as I said, they have built a whole empire of terrorist organization, investing billions in purchasing weapons with the idea to fight the Zionists. with the idea to fight and to destroy the state of Israel. Now, if we look to the north, Lebanon as an example, what we see is the same idea, but a different organization. This time, another Iranian proxy, which is called Hezbollah. Hezbollah is this time not a Sunni organization, but a Shia organization, directly financed and supported by Iran, with the aim, as I said, to export the Iranian revolution under the leadership of Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah. De facto today, Hezbollah is the main, most important, most influential power in Lebanon. The Lebanese have problems of their own. You know, it's a very divided society between Maronitic Christians and Druze, Shiites and Sunnis, very complex society, but the main power is, as I said, another Iranian proxy, Hezbollah, and the only common denominator that Hezbollah has with Hamas is, once again, the wish to destroy the Jewish state. Jews have no right to a country of their own, not in the Middle East. They fight for the destruction of the state of Israel. This is only a map of the southern part of Lebanon. This is the Litani River, and this is the southern part of Israel. That's the border, southern part of Lebanon. These are all Shiite villages. We estimate that in this part of southern Lebanon, Hezbollah, which is based within the civil society in the villages of southern Lebanon, we estimate that they control, that they have between 1,000 and 160,000 missiles and rockets aimed at Israel. As I said, all of them developed, financed, and brought from Iran, an Iranian proxy, with the wish to use them against Israel. We know very well where they hide their the missiles and rockets, and we hope that that will not be the case. But unfortunately, it may be just a matter of time until they will decide to start the next crisis with Israel. Most probably the decision will not be made in Lebanon, but in Tehran, of course, because they are serving the Iranian revolution. We find here many representatives of the so-called Iranian militias and the Iranian, what they call the Revolutionary Guards. And recently we find them also, not recently, it's already a few years, we find them also in Syria, because as you very well know, the main actors that has saved the regime of the butcher from Damascus, who slaughtered more than 500,000 people of his own people, Syrians, with the direct involvement of Hezbollah. Again, with Iranian not only influence but Iranian involvement. And once again, the Iranians are trying now to establish a permanent presence in Syria. They are already present in Lebanon. They wish to establish a permanent presence in Syria. They wish to develop, among other things, a harbor in Syria, with the aim to do the next step, and this is to reach Europe. This is what we see now both in Lebanon and in Syria. In both cases, I'm looking now for a map of the Gaza Strip. Okay, let's speak about the Gaza Strip. No, that's not this one. I don't want to confuse you too much with I hope I have the. Here it is. Yeah. Okay, we spoke about Hamas and another nice guy, Sheikh Sinwar, Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas. Now, what do we have here? Look at the system, the systematic warfare of the Iranians through their proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah. What they do is very simple. They attack Israel, but they do not attack the Israeli military. They attack only civilian population. What we have seen in the last 2 days were more than 400 rockets and missiles aimed at Israeli civilians. Now, a terrorist organization that is doing a double war crime. Why is it a double war crime? Because they are launching from within the civilian population in Gaza, hiding in the villages and the towns in the Gaza Strip, using the Palestinian civilian population here as a shield, yes, as a protective shield, launching missiles from within the civil society and attacking the Israeli civilians. Now, it's a double war crimes because, once again, they are shooting from within the civilian population, attacking the Israeli civilians in the state of Israel. Now, I don't want to elaborate more because I want to speak also about the other side of this coin when referring to the state of Israel, but just to give you an idea of, from a strategic strategic point of view, how things look from Israel. Now, it seems a very frightening picture, but I don't know how many of you visited Israel. Are there any? Wow, quite a lot. And if it was in the last, let's say, 10 years, you have probably seen very well and noticed very well that despite this very, how will I say, problematic picture that I have described here, despite this, Israel is a fantastic success story. When Israel was born, I take you now back to May 1948, there were 600,000 people living in Israel, 600,000 Israelis. Today we are more than 9 million. Israel, when it was born, was practically a desert. Today it is a modern society, the only democracy in the Middle East. All of our neighboring countries, what you saw in this map, all of our neighboring countries are totalitarian regimes, dictatorships. The only democratic, stable country in the region is Israel. A tremendously successful economy based mainly on knowledge. You know that it's almost funny, but Israel is the only country in the Middle East that does not have oil. And while this is the situation, we did not have any other choice but to develop an economy which is based upon something that we do have, and this is the know-how, the knowledge, the best universities, and the ability to innovate. And in the last 20 years, we have developed what is now called, considered to be the second name of Israel, which is the startup nation. We have a very, very interesting ecosystem which combines knowledge from the universities, a very vibrant culture of innovation. We are only second to the Silicon Valleys in terms of number of inventions and the number of startup companies per capita. In this respect, we are very similar to the Swedish phenomena also, especially in what refers to innovation. And this is the main engine of our economy. It's I don't know if you know the Vinnova, the Swedish Vinnova, the innovation. Vinnova has only 3 offices outside of Sweden. One in the Silicon Valley, the other the second one in China, and the third one in Tel Aviv. This very unique ecosystem, which combines, as I said, some of the best universities, the spirit of entrepreneurship, the ability to think out of the box and to innovate, is very unique. And when you come, and hopefully all of you will come to Tel Aviv, you will see the largest concentration of startup companies, new ideas, and innovation in per capita. So basically, and here I would like perhaps to stop, you have these almost conflicting realities. On one hand, a state which is living under a permanent threat if you look to the outside. On the other hand, an island of democracy, a very vibrant society, a successful economy, and we succeed to combine modern and normal life, and the one who goes through the streets of Jerusalem or the Haifa or Tiberias or Tel Aviv does not really feel that we are under threat, and we've succeeded in these 71, almost 72 years of the existence of Israel to develop a spectacular success story, despite all the threats and despite all the what we have seen before. And I can only invite you to come and visit. Sorry that I spoke too long, but I really thank you, and I really invite you to not to be diplomatic and to ask whatever you want, and please.
Thank you.
Thanks.